Thank you for joining us today. And now we'll turn to our first guest. It is my great privilege to introduce a true warrior for medical freedom. Allie Shultz is an attorney currently living in Arizona, where she has sadly lost her mother-in-law to COVID in a hospital that denied treatment, and she will tell you her story. Allie also fought diligently and just fearlessly and fiercely to have her father-in-law released from Mayo Clinic, Scottsdale, Arizona, prior to his death. And he is now recovering with appropriate treatment at home that was denied to him in the prestigious Mayo Clinic. Allie will share that story as well. In addition to being an attorney who has firsthand experience of the horrors that families are going through in hospitals across America today, Allie also ran point on 10 major lawsuits for America's frontline doctors when she was with that organization. She used her legal skills in creative ways to help look at ways to use the legal system constructively to advocate against mask mandates, to assist patients who were denied treatment, and to assist in many ways to enhance the cause of medical freedom. She wrote letters for the public to use, and currently she has been working on a draft of a model criminal complaint that the public, members of the public, can use to file criminal actions against hospitals that are denying access to the patients, denying care, and denying release from the hospital. I think Allie's fight is incredibly important. We are honored to have her on the Legal Advisory Council for Truth for Health Foundation, and you will be hearing more from all of us on the legal front as we advocate in our duty as a public charity to serve the public good and to help prevent harm to the public from lack of treatment, whether it is in hospitals or whether it is early treatment that is being denied. Allie, thank you for your courage, and thank you for tirelessly working on behalf of patients. I'm honored to have you as our featured speaker on today's press conference. So, and again, my condolences for the loss of your mother-in-law. I know you worked very hard to save her life. I'm just grateful you could save your father-in-law's life.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Bleed. It is such an honor. You have done so much for so many patients, and it's just such an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's extremely devastating that I have been in this fight, for everyone else's families, and to allow other people to have access to information and to utilize on their own behalf. And I could only save half of my own family. Of all the families in the world, I never would have thought this would have happened to my own. So I come here humbly, and I would appreciate the opportunity to tell my story and try to save as many other people as humanly possible, because my mom-in-law was on the same page as all of us, and there's no way that I'm going to let her die in vain. She absolutely would be the first in line to make sure everyone had all this information on her behalf, to be able to fight for their own loved ones. So I was a medical power of attorney for both my mom-in-law and dad-in-law. And many people kind of chuckle and say, well, you were pushing early outpatient treatment. I don't understand. How did your own family end up in the hospital? But so for the record, I 100% still believe in early outpatient treatment. They had seen a naturopath doctor that I didn't know, and that person had reduced the dosage of ivermectin that they were on, and I didn't know that. And so anyway, I got a call one day that my father-in-law felt like he needed more oxygen. And when you're hypoxic, you can't think clearly. And quite honestly, I didn't know how bad the hospitals seriously were and what they're doing to people. And so, of course, we just had to let him go. He went in an ambulance to the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix. And then we tried everything to keep my mom-in-law out of the hospital. But 2 days later, she went via ambulance to Banner Thunderbird Hospital in Arizona. And, we were unprepared. I can't believe I'm an attorney and, we're busy doing holiday stuff and birthday parties for grandkids and all this. And we didn't even have their advanced directives and medical power of attorney in order. And so they signed some documentation which appointed me as their medical power of attorney. And in an advanced directive, they put that they refused remdesivir and they refused going on a ventilator. And so because the timing of when they each went to the hospital, as I mentioned, they both were at different hospitals. So it was a very interesting fight because they were both in different places. So we had two parents that are two patients, two places, but they had the same exact protocol in both of those. And since they refused remdesivir, I felt like we were just punished. The reason why they refused remdesivir, though, respectfully, and I agree with them, it's because, it's known to cause kidney toxicity and failure, which ultimately leads to more pulmonary congestion. And I'm obviously not a doctor, but we've done a lot of research on this because you have to be when you're advocating for your own health. But I feel like this is really part of the scam. Even if someone doesn't have any COVID symptoms and they do a positive COVID test and they, as quickly as possible, they go give them the remdesivir. And then if there's any kidney issues, that does cause the pulmonary congestion. So it kind of justifies why they're trying to push a ventilator on that particular patient. But really, if they hadn't given the remdesivir, how do you know if they really wouldn't have had that chest congestion? So we were adamant about refusing it. And after that, I felt like we were totally punished. I'll tell you the end of the story before I tell you the middle, I guess. So my mom-in-law died on September 7th. And like Dr. Vliet said, we were able to get my father-in-law, Chuck, released on September 16th. And released is definitely an interesting word because that is what had to happen. He was not let go or discharged. He had to be released. Mayo, so I'll tell you about my father-in-law first. So Mayo had kept Chuck in the critical care unit in a negative pressure room, claiming that he had this really high oxygen need. They stated there was nowhere else in the hospital that could facilitate even 8 liters of oxygen. They wouldn't downgrade him anywhere. Each time Chuck would reduce his oxygen dependency, an incident would coincidentally happen that would cause him to desaturate. And then Mayo nurses would raise the oxygen liters up far higher than normal for a way longer period of time. They just had no plan to titrate him off of oxygen and no plan to get him home. So I'm not sure that they have any plan for the non-compliers to get to leave the critical care units. As a medical power of attorney, I'm responsible for the life of another. I'm supposed to be their voice, but I could not even verify the most basic things. I didn't even think that it would be a question to ask about how much hydration he's getting or how much nourishment he's getting. But we really, really learned that it's really bad. So I tried everything. I wrote every letter possible. I sent every email possible to advocate for them. I was literally carried out in handcuffs under color of law. I was assaulted under color of law. I was deprived access to their health records. I was deprived access to them, and I was lied to. But that's absolutely nothing compared to what happened to Chuck. The Mayo Clinic deprived Chuck of nourishment and hydration for 6 days, except 1 bag of D5 water. they experimented on Chuck with an investigational drug called baricitinib, which I hadn't even heard of. It's an RA drug that was repurposed at, I guess, 200% the level of its history, only tested on 764 patients, and then used on my father-in-law, Chuck, without knowledge or consent. And then they secluded him for 24 days past the CDC recommendation and Arizona state guidelines from the Department of Health. So related to the lack of nourishment and hydration, I have an audio here with a Mayo administrator. You see, the thing is, from a legal perspective, none of these doctors and hospitals, they have a perverse financial incentive to stay on the Fauci-ouchie protocol. They, as long as they stay exactly on the protocol, they have zero liability whatsoever for any COVID patient. So as long as they're doing that, they think that they're totally immune, except for, willful misconduct, of course, they would be liable for. But they also think that they're immune in tort liability if they are, I guess, working in the standard of care of the local community. That is what a breach of a duty is judged on in a negligence action. So I have an audio I would like to play for you, if that's okay, Dr. Bleet.
Well, let me comment, Allie. I think our audience needs to hear the audio, but I want to be very clear. Allie is physically in Arizona. She was legally representing as power of attorney with fiduciary and legal duties to her father-in-law. And she was a party to this recording. In Arizona, one-party consent recording is totally legal, even if the other party doesn't know they are being recorded. She is a party to the conversation, as you will hear in the recordings that we're playing today. So let's be very clear for our entire audience. These recordings are perfectly legal in the state of Arizona. So thank you for sharing them, Allie.
I think it's worth it to be able to try to save as many people as possible. So thank you for the opportunity. Here we go.
To your question, well, I'm not the right person to respond to the nutrition, but I do feel compelled to at least make one comment on it, realizing that I'm an administrator, not a clinician, which is just that the nutrition approach that they take when someone is admitted, having that many problems with breathing, is exactly what they do. And actually, you would find that to be the case in all hospitals in the Valley. That is the standard of care because of the aspiration risk or the et cetera, right, with those patients who are in that circumstance. But I recognize that you feel differently and you wanted, of course, answers. Okay, well, then why was this being done? I can appreciate, no matter what, having a better explanation of why that clinical path was being followed. So I get that. I want you to, go ahead. Tell me what you're trying to say.
The standard of care is to have a nutrition department do it, be aligned with the patient, at least within the first day or two of being there. And then, yes, of course, we don't want him to aspirate, but maybe he could get some IV hydration, something at all, or I don't know, just an assessment. So I'm sorry, it's not your fault, but like this is happening in your hospital. And I don't understand how like that, it is not the standard of care to not provide any hydration or nourishment to a patient for 6 days, except for one bag of D5 water. And the nurses knew, the nurses all knew about it. I was begging them every single day. Where is their compassion? Why are they not advocating for their patients? They have a responsibility.
Okay, well, Ms. Shultz, I think I'll ask the clinical team if they can revisit this question for you to give an explanation, because I'm obviously not able to speak to it very adequately. So So let me do that, okay? And I will ask them to do that.
Thank you.
It's hard to listen to those, Dr. Lee.
Well, it is, and it's just so staggering to think back to my own hospital days when we were monitoring fluids constantly. And if they were getting too much, you cut back. And if they weren't getting enough, you increased it a little bit. But to go 6 days with only one bag of IV fluid is just staggering. I can't wrap my mind around that.
Me
And
either.
you also had some other conversations that were quite troubling as well.
I did. And I've really been thinking a lot about all of the issues that we encountered as patients and as a patient advocate. And I think seclusion is the #1 issue. And the thing that anyone who currently has a loved one in the hospital can act on right away. Get in there. It is in the patient bill of rights. Like, get in there. They are not to be secluded. Just because they're using the word isolation doesn't mean it makes it any better what they're doing. They're secluding patients. And so Chuck, my father-in-law, was secluded for 24 days past the CDC and Arizona Department of Health guidelines. In Arizona, they say the guidelines are to isolate or seclude yourself for 10 days post the onset of symptoms. And, Chuck had gone to the hospital on the 10th day of his symptoms. With my mom-in-law, Christy, they were trying to get us to remove her ventilator without allowing us the ability to get in to see her and assess her. We can't do that. We want to be with her. Why would they possibly be, how could someone make that decision without assessing their loved one? And so this is a huge legal issue, because if you think about it, when an American is isolated from others, what is this considered? Unlawful imprisonment, torture. I'm doing my job has never been a defense to crimes against humanity. This is a huge issue. So that's why, in order to seclude and restrain patients, there is actually very, very strict guidelines for healthcare workers. And it cannot be a blanket order. There needs to be a new order every 24 hours. And if it goes past a few days, they need a judge to sign a court order. They cannot just blanket seclude someone for this long. And they also cannot conspire to make sure every hospital around them is doing the same thing. So I have those audios to play here.
I think that's a critical point, that they were violating state policies as well.
Correct.
Decision. As far as visitation in our hospital, we are not going to allow you to visit him in our hospital as long as he is here.
One more for you, Dr. Lee.
Being put in PPE. What I do know is that there's at all of the hospitals, because I meet with all of the other chief medical officers in the hospital 3 times a week, and there is no visitation for patients who test positive in any of the hospitals. That may be.
So they're meeting and they're all deciding on this together. So either this is becoming the standard of care, or this is the same modus operandi, which actually criminally makes it easier to prove.
So what are the steps that you are taking, both in Arizona and in the work with the foundation nationally, where we are working to assist people in other states? What are some of the legal steps that you're working on that can stop this incredible abuse of human rights in ways that we've never seen in this country, especially not in hospital systems? I mean, literally, prisoners in America's jails do have more rights right now than COVID patients in America's hospitals. It's unheard of.
It's absolutely unheard of. Well, I mean, there's a problem with prosecutorial discretion. It's the state of Arizona who decides whether they're going to bring a criminal action against a defendant. And I have a police report right here from the Mayo Clinic that says felony, vulnerable adult abuse, intentional endangerment, health, felony completed. And it's up to the discretion of a prosecutor if they're going to charge these doctors that are still taking care of patients right now today at Mayo in Arizona. And so what I am doing is I have formed a private criminal complaint that a private citizen can file through the Attorney General's website. It lays out all of the collusion. It lays out even the collusion from a national level and then down to a state level. And it's very easy to adapt this to other states. I know Texas and Colorado has done similar things already as well. It's just finding someone to remember their oath and fulfill their duty and act on this complaint. So I think if we have enough people to put pressure on reminding people of their duties, and then we might make some change here.
Very good, Allie. I think that's a profoundly important step. So basically, what your strategy has been is to empower individuals to take into their own hands the right to file a criminal complaint in their state. You've provided the document that gives them the template to use, and this can be done through the state attorney general's office. And we can certainly assist you in helping the public awareness that they have that right to do it and that you have given the guidance. So I hope that Arizonans will take the step to advocate for their loved ones in the way that Allie has done for hers, and that you will look at the resources provided. And you're making that available to us for our website as well.
I am, and also on the Hands for Health and Freedom website, and then also on the Truth for Health website as well. And it truly is, Dr. Bleet, you said it so perfectly, that it is all in our hands from a legal perspective and from a healthcare perspective. So yes, thank you.
Allie, again, thank you for your courage. Thank you for advocating for not only justice for your mother-in-law and the injuries that your father-in-law has sustained, but also for all of the voiceless people who haven't known where to turn. You truly are a warrior, and we just appreciate your efforts so much. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for everything you do, Dr. Bleet. Thank you.
Thank